The first message from all this set of research is that improving access to schools can increase learning. Well, maybe that's not such a, surprising result, but there's been a lot of despair about we improved access, but learning hasn't improved. What we did is we improved access and learning isn't as good as we hoped it was going to be, I think, is one of the messages. So where you've got studies that look at introducing schooling, this last one on the right, village-based schools in Afghanistan, they introduced schools to communities where there were no schools. There was really quite substantial increases in learning because you're really changing access in a very big way, which, as I say, is what we have done across the world, particularly in poor countries. The other one that seems to work was just about getting kids to turn up more regularly. It provided merit scholarships to the kids who performed well in school. They would get a scholarship to go to school, go on to a secondary school. And that was also very effective, but it mixes improved access with some motivation. So that's, and there are areas where people have moved access on the margin and it hasn't actually improved learning. So I think the takeaway from that is if you have, if you introduce education in an area where nobody was going to school, you really are moving things. But it's not the only thing. Doing it, marginal improvements may not have big effects on test scores. Now this is a really clear, bunch of zeros. Every single one of these things in this chart is an individual randomized trial, with hundreds of schools usually. And the main takeaway, this is all studies that looked at adding stuff to schools. So they reduced class size by introducing more teachers, nothing. Introduced more textbooks, nothing. Flip charts, nothing. They gave school grants, so this is the money that could be spent in any way that the schools wanted. Worked in the first year, nothing. Went back to zero in the second year. Reducing class size in India, building libraries, nothing. Again, giving flexible money in Indonesia, giving flexible money in Gambia, nothing. Just really, overwhelmingly, if you just give more stuff, nothing is going to change. The last one starts to tell us what is going wrong here. And this is the fact that when you gave textbooks in schools in Kenya, the average child did not improve, but the kids at the top of the class did improve. Why? Because the curricula, as I'll come back to, is tailored to the top of the class. And most of the kids in the school couldn't read the textbook. So it wasn't doing any good. So we've got to think about more fundamental things if we really want to improve education. This is about trying to make schools more accountable to the local community and bringing in parents into a school management committee that has some say over the community and over how the school is run. And what I would say from that is many of the studies have shown no impact, but where you do have impact, because it's so cheap, there's really dramatic improvements. What I take away from that is, if you can make it work, great, but a lot of people haven't been able to make that model work. All these studies were about what happened in the classroom. And if we're going to improve education in developing countries, this is where we have to make a difference. So these are changes in pedagogy. Now the first two with zeros are actually, shouldn't really be on this slide, but they introduce computer education. So they introduce computers into classrooms. Nothing, nothing. It's just like the business as usual inputs. You just bring a computer, nothing. Now, if you do have computers and you use them to do programs that are different, and you teach in a different way because you've got a computer, then you have some hope. So the next one, readathon in the Philippines, is just setting aside time where kids just read. That was helpful. And again, remember, one is stunningly effective, multiple times more effective than anything going on in the US with that kind of money. Then there's computer-assisted learning that you use the fact that you're working with a computer, that it adjusts to the level of the child. So we don't have this problem that the textbook is up here and the kid is down here. The computer program could adjust to what the kid knows and teach them what they're not. And that is really what happens in all the good pedagogy, is where there's a series of studies that have looked about how can we get learning to be at the level of the child. Understand what the child knows and then teach them the next step, rather than having a curricula that's up here that is unrelated to what the children know. So you get these remedial education programs, streaming programs, tracking programs, where you divide children into those who know English. Often they're being taught in the second or third language, and so if you're going to teach in English and that's not the kid's language, you're going to teach very differently if you know the kids in the class don't know any English, versus maybe the top kids do know English and it's okay to teach in English. So it's really about knowing where the child is and designing the curricula around where they are. The other thing that's very clear is teacher accountability matters. So there's a huge problem of teacher absenteeism in developing countries. So, 20%, if you go randomly to a school, you'll find something like 20% of teachers aren't there on a given day. Even if they are in the school, they're sitting in the staff room, they're not actually teaching. So how do we change that? And you can see if you add inputs, but the teachers, elsewhere, that you're not going to get any change. So all of these are different ways to try and improve accountability. Some of them work better than others, but it's clearly something we've got to work on. So overall, what have we learned? We've learned that we spend a lot of money on things that don't work to improve learning. We've got a problem of really huge variety in the classroom. We've got kids who can't recognise letters in third grade, and they're quite advanced, all in one classroom. The teachers just aren't able to cope with that. So dividing the class so that you can focus on the level of the child has been one of the most effective approaches. And this is a picture of something which, a very effective program by Prasan, where they pull out the kids who know, at a given level, and they actually have them working on maths. So they've just no inputs apart from some chalk on the floor, and yet this is unbelievably effective.